Okay, with long division that we did before, we were given one factor and we're asked to find what does it multiply by to get the polynomial. This time, we're not going to give you any factor. We're just going to say, here's the polynomial. What are the factors? So it's going to tell you to factor completely. To factor completely, you have to write it as a product of unfactorable polynomials with integer coefficient. What that means is that I am looking for something times something times something, however many times that it takes in order for me to get to the polynomial. And each of these factors cannot be factored anymore in order to make it factored completely. So let's take a look at a couple. Remember, very, very important, you always want to factor out the greatest common factor first. Factor out your greatest common factor first. Because that's going to make the polynomial, a lot smaller and more factorable, easier to factor. And you won't have a common factor within each of your factor, within any of your factor. So let's take a look at the first one. I have x cubed minus 4x squared minus 5x. The coefficient is 1, 4, and 5. There's no greatest common factor on that. But if you look at your variable, that's x cubed, x squared, and an x. You have 3 x's, 2 x's, and 1 x. They all have 1 x in common. So I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor of x. That means divide it out. That leaves me with x squared minus 4x minus 5. And when I do that, I'm left with a trinomial. In fact, this is a quadratic. And then I'm going to try to factor this quadratic right here, this quadratic trinomial right there. Because there are 3 terms, I'm going to try using my X box. Remember that AC goes on the top part, B goes on the bottom part. So A is 1. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. B is negative 4. So now I'm looking for a number, 2 numbers, multiplied by each other to get negative 5. Right? Multiply to get negative 5, add to get negative 4. Well, I can do negative 5 times positive 1. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. Now that I know what those 2 numbers is, those 2 numbers goes in the diagonal, negative 5x, 1x. Your first box is going to be your x squared, your ax squared. The second box, last box, is going to be your C, which is minus 5. Doing the same thing, cover up the bottom 2. You have x squared and minus 5x. Greatest common factor of these 2 boxes is x. So I'm going to put an x right out there. Using that x, I can now figure out what goes inside. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. X times 1 is positive 1x. Double check, negative 5 times positive 1 equals a negative 5. All right, so that trinomial, quadratic trinomial, is going to factor out to be x minus 5 times x plus 1. Don't forget, we factored out an x before, so that x we need to make sure that we put that x back outside. This is now completely factored. And if you take a look at the second one's a little trickier because it's not a trinomial. We still need to look at the greatest common factor first. You have 3 and 48. So I know that 3 goes into both 3 and 48. Look at the variable, y to the 5th and y to the 3rd. There are 5 y's and 3 y's. There are 3 y's in common in between because if you write it out, The first one has 5y, y times itself 5 times. The second term has 3y. There are 1, 2, 3 y's in common. So that's y to the third power. That's my greatest common factor. And then let's divide that out. 3y to the fifth divided by 3y cubed is going to give me 1y squared. 48 divided by 3 is going to give me 16. Y cubed divided by y cubed is going to cancel that. This is a difference of square, like we saw earlier in the lesson yesterday. So with difference of square, you can look in the formula chart, because that's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. That is a special pattern. With the special pattern from the formula chart, I know a squared minus b squared is a plus b times a minus b. So that means that's y plus 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, times y minus 4. And then I pull down my greatest common factor, 3y to the third power. Now everything is factored out, and nothing can be factored out even more from my factors. And last but not least, if you take a look at part C, this one, I have another 3 terms. Checking it out, 5, 30, 45. That has 5 as a common factor, greatest common factor. So I'm going to take that out, 5. I have z to the fourth, z to the third, and z squared. All of these have 2 z's in common, z times z. So that's going to be z squared. Dividing that out, it's going to give me z to the second plus 6z plus 9. Now I can look at these 3 terms. It is a quadratic, it is a trinomial, so I'm going to do an Xbox on this one. AC is 1 times 9, so 1 times 9 is 9. B is 6. 2 numbers that multiply together to get 9, add up to get 6 is 3. 3 and 3. So I get 3z, 3z. First square is z squared, last square is 9. Greatest common factor between the top 2 boxes are z. So z times z is z squared. Z times 3 is 3z. Z times 3. So I get z plus 3 times z plus 3. Pull down the greatest common factor, 5z squared. I have now completely factored this polynomial.